Sanjay does a really, really incredible job of telling powerful, nuanced stories about our food and agriculture systems. And I have to say, he's one of the people who's inspired me the most over the last several years. I really, really love Sanjay, and I'm so glad he's here. So please give him a round of applause. So Sanjay, I want to start. Do you have a mic? Can we have a mic for Sanjay, please? Thank you so much. So I'm hoping that we can go back a few years and talk about Gather first, because it's available on Netflix, right? Gather's still available on Netflix so you can go home and watch it. The film focuses on native food systems, which have often been ignored, undervalued, stigmatized, destroyed. And I'm wondering if you can talk about how you approach the film and the importance of sort of relationship building throughout that process.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you, Dani. Thank you, Bernie. Thank you, everyone, for being here. As people probably already know, we're on Paiute, Ute, Shoshone, Goshute, Diné land. This was a very, very carefully tended microclimate. I mean, deserts are very, very fragile. And for tens of thousands of years, this environment was in balance. Europeans didn't actually come to this part of Utah until 1765, wow. 270 years after Columbus hit the Caribbean. And America is not even 250 years old.
Right.
So you could see how late colonization happened here and how quickly everything was turned upside down. I mean, the movies I make are about violence.
Yeah.
They're about the effects of colonization on unconsciousness, on the people who are the frontline workers in food systems, like farm workers. Gather is a film about a long existing part of this part of the world, the deep relationship between human beings and their environment, the cultural, the spiritual, the physical relationship that people have with food. All of us come from somewhere, right? It's only in the last 500 or 600 years that human beings have been this mobile, but most of us have forgotten where we came from and lost that spiritual connection to why we are who we are. Indigenous people all around the world have sacrificed their lives to continue to maintain that, even in the onslaught of capitalism, the onslaught of technology, the onslaught of a globalized food system. So Gather is about a small glimpse of that movement on Turtle Island. We've got Blue Adams here from IndigiHub. She's Diné, she's Mandan Hidatsa. You'll hear her speak later. And she's the PhD. I'm the kindergartner up here. So in Gather, we follow a number of Native American food producers, from Chef Nephi Craig to buffalo and bison farmers to foragers, and really get a sense of what the solution is to all of the global food system and environmental crises. Be a steward of where you are. Understand what that means, and understand that you cannot do that alone.
Right.
And there's a lot of movements that have come up in the last 5 years or 10 years or 100 years, but this particular movement has been here since time immemorial. And we as modern human beings are very, very good at thinking of ourselves as the first people to come up with the solution. And we ignore the long history of that solution. And there's no place in the world that's better than that than the United States. We think that the problems we have now are the first time we've ever dealt with those problems. And we ignore the teachers of the past. Native people, they still exist, the tribe still exists, and they do have the solutions. So Gather took us into those communities to understand how we could learn and adopt those solutions.
When you talk about adopting those solutions, I've heard many sort of in the regenerative agriculture arena or sphere talk about how regenerative agriculture is this kind of new thing without acknowledging that it's based on millennia of practices and research by indigenous communities. How do we help sort of change that narrative when we're talking about regenerative agriculture so that all of us can remember to respect and honor those traditions that came long before any of us were here?
That's a great question, and with all due respect, although it probably isn't going to sound very respectful, Like saying that regenerative agriculture is a new movement is saying like Facebook is the first time that human beings ever got linked together. It's not new. And it's largely a movement that has been lucky to create the strength that it has. And it's weirdly, it's done so initially by ignoring a lot of the work of the past.
Right.
Now, the movement's done a good job in the last few years to realize that what they've invented is not new. It shouldn't be commodified. It shouldn't be sold. It shouldn't be monetized, because the people that hold that knowledge hold the wisdom because they understand that the wisdom does not have a price.
Right.
And so with regenerative agriculture, there's tribes doing it. It's like, yeah, tribes do have problems caused by those of us who moved to North America. But tribes have been doing this in a better way than these modern movements. And the elements of that regenerative movement that I think are the most successful are the ones that have been including that millennia-long focus, understanding that there's no cookie-cutter approach, that America is not a monolith. There's tens of thousands of microclimates, and people that have been in those microclimates for millennia often have solutions to the types of things we want to try to achieve.
Right.
So it's taking away the kind of like masquerading as experts and understanding that we're all just students.
Right.
There's no leaders. We're all followers of each other.
We're all just students and followers. I love that. One of the last times we were together on stage was at South by Southwest, and we were joined by Ade Romero-Briones, one of my favorite people of the First Nations Development Institute. And she raised the point that people in power, those with money, have the ability to decide whose stories get told. And we've seen that with some of the regenerative agriculture folks. But we're seeing that more space is being made for greater diversity of voices. But I'm wondering, as a filmmaker, how you think about continuing to change that model, continuing to change that paradigm, so that the people whose stories are being told right now, how can those folks actually tell their own stories?
That is the million-dollar question. I mean, it's expensive making movies.
Yeah.
It's expensive attending events. It's expensive for a lot of people who want to come to Sundance, to beautiful Park City, to make it here. And all the conversations I've been having the last few days are how do we bring the people to these spaces, regardless of color, that are the most eager to tell stories.
Right.
And trying to find a way to like decommodify storytelling. So to me, it's not about ethnicity. It's not about background. It's about inspiration.
Right.
How do we find the people that have the most inspiration? How do we fund and fuel their voices and create space? You guys do a great job in creating space. You hold these events everywhere. And I think the more times that we can convene and even ask that question, even though most of us don't have an answer yet, the more space we make for people to be a part of the conversation.
No, and I ask these questions because I don't know the answer. And so I'm just trying to seek knowledge among all of us who are here because of a film festival, right?
Well, so I'm part of a small foundation that actively seeks out these voices. And they're hard to find. It's like you just can't put something out on Instagram, because the people who need to see it might not know it. You've got to have friends like Blue who are in communities doing a lot of work. You know, IndigiHub is a hub, doing a million different things, and you've got to be able to reach out to people like that, whether they're in Provo, Utah, or whether they're in the Bronx, or whether they're in Bel Air, Los Angeles, and say, who do you know that's dying to tell a story? And like, we with money, connect us to them, and let's see if we can help facilitate that process. It's all about that kind of grassroots on the ground access, whatever the community is.
Yeah. Sanjay, we talked about impact on the last panel, and I wonder what you learned from Gather is sort of what had the greatest impact as you sort of took the film around during the pandemic and showed it in different places. What was the greatest sort of impact for you?
Well, the kids, right? It's like, we didn't think that Gather would be seen by anybody. It's a small, very niche film. But the catalyst was the murder of George Floyd in the summer of 2020. And a lot of kids understood in this disinformation landscape, I'm not like a conspiracy theorist, but like this disinformation landscape, a lot of kids feel like they're not being taught the truth.
Right.
Of course, there's truth in everything. But they understood that there was an aspect of the colonization of America that wasn't just about the violence against bodies. It was about the violence against land. It's like the land had to be stolen for the bodies to be imported to work the land. And there were bodies that were on that land in the beginning. those bodies were invisibilized. Those bodies were the victims of genocide. And that's the story that Gather tells. And it was about kids finding out that the movie existed.
Yeah.
And it's like we became like, I mean, social media was what catapulted our movie in front of people. And it's like, how many people in this room are under 20? Under 22. Under 22. So it's like that's part of it. It's
Sure,
like,
sure.
It's like no criticism, but it's like, you know, the
Absolutely.
stuff that we're making, the media that we're making it's for a population that's not in this room.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of it too.
Yeah.
It's like those are the storytellers out there. Those are the people that normally had to go through filters of school, education, et cetera, getting into rooms like this before they could show something on the screen.
Right.
But like we've got to find those voices right now. And Gather taught me that, like, gosh, I hope nobody over 40, no offense to anybody here, but I'm obviously over 40, but I hope nobody over 40 ever makes an environmental film again.
I love it.
I hope it's everybody who are going to have to live through the crap that like
Yeah.
we've created, the kids that are like 15, 18, 20.
Right.
Like let them make stuff and let them be the ones on the street really trying to create that impact.
And they're going to make films so differently, and they're going to do
Yeah.
things so differently.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I can't wait for that. I want to switch gears a little bit because you're doing something so interesting right now, and I want you to have a chance to talk about it so I can learn about it. You're working on a project about Sally Hemings of Monticello, and just tell me everything, Sanjay.
Yeah, in a nutshell, my new movie, which God knows when it's going to be done, because everybody but you have been afraid of me talking about it.
I'm not afraid.
It's about the oldest living descendant of Sally Hemings of Monticello, a 95-year-old PhD matriarch from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and her deep and abiding relationship with a very aristocratic descendant, white descendant of Thomas Jefferson. And understanding that the relationship that we all think their families have tainted the families, have changed the way the families have perceived themselves. I mean, Dr. Mary Atkins is our main character, and you know, she knows that Sally Hemings is now probably the first African-American woman that kids learn about in school. And she's taught as people learn about Sally as someone's mistress, as someone's slave, as
Right,
someone
right,
in an unequal, you know, a powerless relationship. But in their family, their matriarch was always Sally's mother, who of course was enslaved as well, but it's like the story that they have about Sally's mother, Betty, is one of resilience, one of power, one of culture, one of teaching. And they feel they've lost that story because of mythology.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you know, the person who's a descendant of Thomas Jefferson this isn't live stream, right? He can't get a date anymore because it's like his whole line was like, I'm a lineal descendant of Thomas Jefferson. And it worked until like 1998. It worked really, really well. And so like now people just go, oh, you're a descendant of a rapist and a pedophile. But, and I can't give away the ending, but the families do what we've all done, Ancestry, 23andMe, and they've gone to a different forensic level. And the twist in the story is data that they're now using to reframe all the emotions around race and reparation. History is myth, storytelling's myth, but even filmmakers very rarely do we actually tell the actual truth. We tell the truth that we think the market wants or that we think you'll want to watch. And so the families, through data, realize what the actual relationship is and what the nuances of that relationship is, and for the first time are forced to actually have an honest conversation, not about race, but about relationship. I mean, we all know race is a construct. It's like if you peel apart the 3 or 4 or 5 traits that separate people from looking different, everybody's the same. It's going to take a while for us to get there because of all the crap that we've done weaponizing race.
Right.
But science is the great arbiter. And these families, the biggest racial story in America, in 1802, for those who know American history, is no longer about race.
It's fascinating. I can't wait.
So
to
hopefully
learn more.
it'll be done for the 250th anniversary of America, which is 2026.
Nice.
So it seems like forever away, but
No.
it's around the corner.
It's around the corner. I wonder what working on Gather and Food Chains, what you learned from those movies that is helping with this film.
So this is what I learned. and I think this is applicable to everybody. How many people, by show of hands, know what was in the cupboards of their grandmothers? So about a third. How about the cupboards of your grandmother's grandmothers? One. The indigenous woman in the room. So I went to my dad and said, do you remember, and my mom, who are in their late 80s, and said, do you remember what was in your grandmother's kitchen? And they told me ingredients that are not part of Indian cuisine, but it's what made the people in those villages where my ancestors probably lived for 500 or 1,000 years survive and adapt. And that's the genetic information in me. So those stories of your past and understanding the culture down to the foods your ancestors ate made me realize, I mean, it's not constructive for me, made me realize how separated I am from my environment. It's like how much I need to change my focus on the environment if I really want to be a steward. And I think I'm 1% there. But at least I know that I'm 1%
At least you know,
there.
right? And that I think that's something that you demonstrate and educate us also effectively about. We're all sort of trying, right? We don't have to be perfect. It's not.
And everybody
all
here
in.
is trying hard.
Right.
In this room, everyone's trying hard, which is great.
Right. How do we reach the people out of this room, Sanjay?
More events, and it's like I cannot emphasize enough, like getting to people that are under 25. Like I was on a panel, I was watching a panel yesterday on environmental filmmaking with Pat Mitchell, Mary Robinson, and I think Pat Mitchell's granddaughter. She was probably the only person under 25 in the room. And you just go like, the 25-year-olds here, like all they think they can get into are parties. And it's like, no,
go to the
no,
panels,
but they don't even know about these things. Like we've got to get them in the panels. We've got to make them part of the conversation. We've got to give them the cameras.
Absolutely.
We've got to give them the funding.
Absolutely. Say that again.
Funding.
Yeah, that's what they need. And
I'll give you my Venmo, and I'll give out the money people want.
No, I wish we had more young people in the room, and it's something that, like, at every event, when I don't have, usually I have a lot of students. It's harder here in Park City where it's very expensive, but like that youthful energy is what we need at all of these events.
It's the most exclusive film festival in the Western Hemisphere, and it's like, we all have to do more next year to make sure that we're not still talking about this.
To end, Sanjay, so when, getting more young filmmakers in this realm, what is your advice to them? Or should they just sort of wing it?
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, winging it is great. It's like those of us who've come before are also part of the problem. And like, I make long-form documentaries, and like, they're hard to make, they cost a lot of money, and they're hard to get out into the streaming platforms. And as years go by, those niche platforms become more and more exclusive and more selective. And now they're at a point where they don't want climate stories. They don't want human rights stories because, like, when we come home from work and we're looking to, like, binge watch, we don't want to watch, as beautiful as the manatee story was. Like, most of us aren't going to flip on the manatee story when we've got, like, Jack Reacher.
Sure.
Shows you what I watch. We need to find ways to just get cameras in kids' hands, and they know how to get their content to other people. Whether it's social media or YouTube, they're really good at that. And it's telling them that, like, what they're doing is going to be critical for their movement, and that we're behind it and we'll support in whatever ways they need us to.
Yeah, it'll be like the best reality TV out there.
Yeah.
I love it.
Or the worst.
But I think giving them that opportunity to experiment and fail and keep trying. That's why that funding is so critical. And I think coming back to that point is really, because it's been hard for you as a filmmaker to fundraise. It's hard for all filmmakers to fundraise. And so how do we make that easier? How do we encourage philanthropy to help tell those stories?
To take those risks. To just say, like, we'll give out 100 grants of $10,000 and we don't care what happens. We're not going to judge. Just go out and do it and fail big.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here.
You.
It's always
Thank
a pleasure.
Everyone.
Thank you so much. Love you, man. Thank you.